Have you ever felt like you were meant for something more? Like the life you were living was just a placeholder for the real one that was waiting for you? This is the story of a boy named Pip, an orphan whose journey begins in a lonely churchyard in the marshes of Kent. Surrounded by the graves of his family, his only comfort is his gentle brother-in-law, Joe, a humble blacksmith. Pip's world is small, quiet, and defined by the harsh hand of his older sister. But one cold evening, everything changes. A figure rises from the mist, an escaped convict. Terrifying and desperate, he grabs Pip and demands food and a file to break his chains. Terrified, Pip obeys, stealing from his own home to help this stranger. This secret act of kindness, born from fear and pity, becomes the first thread in a web that will shape his entire life. When soldiers later recapture the convict, the man protects Pip by confessing he stole the food himself. This unexpected mercy leaves a permanent mark on Pip's soul. Soon after, Pip is summoned to Sadie's house, a decaying mansion where time itself has stopped. Here he meets the eccentric Miss Havisham, a wealthy woman forever frozen on her wedding day, dressed in a rotting bridal gown. And he meets Estella, her beautiful, adopted daughter, who is as cold as she is lovely. Estella mocks Pip for being a common, laboring boy, and for the first time, Pip feels a burning shame for his simple life. A dangerous ambition is born. He must become a gentleman. He dreams of winning Estella's love and believes Miss Havisham is his secret patron, grooming him for a life of wealth and status with her. He starts to resent the forge, to resent Joe's simple goodness, all because he's convinced he's destined for something greater. He wants to be worthy of a world that looks down on him. Years pass. Pip is now a young man, apprenticed to Joe and miserable in his fate. He feels trapped, his dreams of being a gentleman slipping away. Then, one night, a powerful London lawyer named Mr. Jaggers appears with a stunning announcement. An anonymous benefactor has bestowed a great fortune upon Pip. He has great expectations. The rules are simple. He must move to London, become a gentleman, and never ask who is funding his transformation. Pip is certain it's Miss Havisham. His wildest dreams are coming true. This is at the beginning of his real life, the path that leads straight to Estella. He says a clumsy, guilt-ridden goodbye to Joe, the one person who has always loved him unconditionally, and heads for the glittering, deceptive world of London. He lives with a new friend. Herbert Pocket learns the ways of high society and spends his money freely. He's becoming the gentleman he always wanted to be. But the more he changes on the outside, the more he feels a growing emptiness inside. He becomes ashamed of Joe, embarrassed by his own roots. His new life is built on a fortune from an unknown source, managed by the cold, intimidating Jaggers, whose office is a museum of London's dark underbelly. Pip believes he's climbing toward the light, toward love and acceptance. He thinks wealth and status will finally make him whole, but he's wrong. His entire world is built on a lie, and the truth, hidden in the shadows of his past, is about to come for him. The convict from the marshes is not just a memory, and his real story is far from over. Pip's great expectations are about to be shattered, forcing him to confront the man he's become and the kindness he left behind. What happens when the life he dreamed of turns out to be a nightmare? In the skies, imagine arriving in a city that promises to make all your dreams come true, only to find yourself more lost than ever. This was Pip's reality when he first set foot in London. His great expectations had led him here, but the city itself was a colossal, indifferent beast. The streets were a chaotic symphony of rattling coaches and hurried faces, the air thick with mud and smoke. Instead of the grandeur he'd imagined, Pip felt a crushing wave of confusion and unease. He found a small comfort in his new roommate at Barnard's Inn, Herbert Pocket. You might remember him as the pale young gentleman Pip fought in Miss Havisham's garden all those years ago. Now, he was Pip's closest friend, cheerful, kind, and just as new to the world of gentlemen as Pip was. "You're to be a gentleman, Pip," Herbert once said with a smile. "And so am I," though were both rather unfinished articles. They laughed, but the word gentleman weighed heavily on Pip's mind. What did it even mean? Was it about having money and fine clothes? Or was it about forgetting the simple, honest life you left behind? Pip's education as a gentleman was overseen by Herbert's father, Matthew Pocket, a brilliant but absent-minded scholar. London society, Pip quickly learned, was a strange performance. People like Mrs. Pocket were obsessed with their supposed aristocratic blood, yet their lives seemed to lack any real dignity. It was all about appearances. Looming over everything was the formidable figure of Jaggers, Pip's guardian. Jaggers was a powerful lawyer, his office a grim museum of death masks and relics of crime. He was cold, precise, and utterly emotionless. "I am paid to do my duty," he once told Pip. "I am not paid to explain it." Jaggers' world was harsh and unforgiving. But then there was his clerk, Wemmick, a man of fascinating contradictions. At the office, Wemmick was as hard and sharp as his boss. But at his home, a quirky little house designed like a miniature castle, he was warm, whimsical, and full of heart. Wemmick showed Pip that it was possible to keep your humanity separate from your ambition. A lesson Pip was slow to learn. As Pip's allowance grew, so did his pride. He slipped easily into a life of expensive habits, fashionable clothes, and careless spending. He started to drift away from his past, especially from Joe Gargery, the kind blacksmith who had raised him. Joe's letters, once a source of comfort, now felt awkward and unsophisticated. When Joe finally visited London, Pip was mortified. He was ashamed of Joe's rough country manners, but mostly, he was ashamed of his own snobbery. Joe, with his immense heart, sensed Pip's discomfort immediately. "You and me is not two figures to be together in London, Pip," he said gently, his voice full of a sad understanding. "But ever the best of friends, ain't us?" Those words cut Pip deeper than any criticism, but he was too proud, too lost in his new life, to ask Joe to stay. He just let him go, letting that pure, unconditional love walk right out of his life. With a growing emptiness inside him, Pip's thoughts constantly turned to one person, Estella. He would visit Sadie's house, which seemed darker and more decayed each time he went. Miss Havisham was still there, a living ghost trapped in the ruins of her wedding day, her bitterness poisoning the very air. Estella, on the other hand, had grown even more beautiful and infinitely more cruel. "You must know," she told Pip with a chilling calm, "that I have no heart." And all the while, Miss Havisham would watch them, her eyes burning with a strange fire. "Love her, love her, love her," she would whisper fiercely to Pip, as if his inevitable heartbreak was her personal victory. Pip, blinded by his infatuation, clung to a desperate belief that Miss Havisham was his secret benefactor, and that Estella was destined to be his. This misguided hope fueled his pride and clouded his judgment completely. This illusion couldn't last. Pip and Herbert sank deeper and deeper into debt, living a life of reckless extravagance. They threw parties, joined expensive clubs, and spent money they didn't have, all in an attempt to keep up appearances. But London society offered only fleeting pleasures, leaving Pip feeling more restless and unfulfilled than ever. His grand life was built on a foundation of borrowed money and hollow friendships. Then, one dark and stormy night, everything came crashing down. A stranger appeared at his door, a rough, weather-beaten man, soaked to the bone. Pip stared, and a cold dread washed over him as he recognized the face from his childhood. It was Abel Magwitch, the escaped convict he had helped on the marshes so long ago. The man stepped inside, his eyes fixed on Pip. "I'm your second father, Pip," he said, his voice raspy. "And you're my gentleman." Pip recoiled in absolute horror. The truth, so long hidden, fell upon him like a physical blow. His benefactor wasn't the eccentric Miss Havisham. His wealth didn't come from a grand, romantic destiny. It came from this man, a hunted criminal, an exile. All his fine clothes, his education, his social standing, it was all built on the sweat and suffering of Magwitch. "I've made you," Magwitch said, his voice filled with a fierce, possessive pride. "I lived rough, starved, worked hard all for you." In that moment, Pip's entire world shattered. His great expectations were a lie. His fortune was stained, his gentlemanly life a sham. He was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of fear, shame, and disgust. He wasn't destined for greatness. He was the pet project of a convict. But as the initial shot began to fade, something else stirred within him. It was a flicker of pity, a grudging sense of connection to this man who had risked everything for him. Magwitch told him his story. He spoke of being transported to a penal colony, of years of brutal labor, and of his vow to make the boy who had shown him a small act of kindness into a gentleman. He had returned to England, a crime punishable by death, just to see the result of his life's work. "Looky here, Pip," Magwitch said softly. "I swore you should have everything I hadn't." In that confession, Pip saw the tragic depth of the man's sacrifice. He finally understood how blind he had been blind to true loyalty, blind to what real sacrifice looked like. His expectations hadn't been great because they were noble. They had been great because of the immense, hidden cost paid by another. The world outside was no longer a place of opportunity, but a web of danger. The law was hunting for Magwitch, and worse, Compeyson, the very man who had betrayed Magwitch years ago, was also in England. The net was closing in. Trapped between his fear for his own safety and a growing sense of duty to the man who had made him, Pip faced the most important choice of his life. The illusion of being a gentleman was gone. Now, he had to decide what it meant to be a good man. He looked at Magwitch, no longer with revulsion, but with a new, somber understanding. And he made a promise that would mark his true moral awakening. "I will stand by you," Pip said quietly. "I will help you as I can." For the first time since arriving in London, Pip wasn't acting to impress society or fulfill a fantasy. He was acting from his conscience. The glittering dream of London had faded, replaced by a darker, more profound reality. His journey was no longer about ambition. It was now a test of courage, loyalty, and redemption, a path that would demand immense sacrifice before it could ever lead to wisdom. Once Pip learned the shocking truth about his benefactor, his life spiraled into its darkest, most dangerous chapter. The glittering illusion of being a gentleman shattered, replaced by raw fear, a heavy sense of responsibility, and a newly awakened conscience. His benefactor was none other than Magwitch, the convict from the marshes, now a hunted man. If discovered, he would be sentenced to death. He was entirely dependent on Pip's secrecy and courage. Suddenly, London was no longer a city of promise. It was a terrifying maze of shadowy alleys and lurking threats. Every corner seemed to hold a new danger. Pip quickly found a discreet lodging for Magwitch by the river, a place where he could remain hidden. His loyal and steadfast friend, Herbert Pocket, joined him without a second thought, and together they began to plot the old man's escape from England. "We have to get him out by water," Herbert insisted, his voice tense with urgency. "There's no other way. It's our only chance." But danger was already closing in. Compeyson, Magwitch's sworn enemy, the very man who had framed and ruined him years ago, was also in London, a ghost from a bitter past. Magwitch, his voice thick with a lifetime of pain, finally revealed the full story. He had it all, Magwitch growled, remembering Compeyson. The education, the fancy manners, the handsome face. "I had nothing, but it was me they branded a monster." In that moment, Pip saw the world he once admired for what it truly was. He realized that so-called respectability often concealed deep cruelty, while a rough exterior could hide unwavering loyalty and profound love. His journey of painful discovery then led him back to Sadie's house, where events were about to take a tragic and fiery turn. Pip confronted Miss Havisham, whose icy heart, after years of calculated revenge, was finally beginning to thaw with remorse. Surrounded by the decaying splendor of her long-dead wedding feast, she listened as Pip laid his soul bare. "You made me what I am," he said, his voice filled not with anger, but with a deep, aching sorrow. "You used my heart as a weapon against Estella and against yourself," shaken to her core. Miss Havisham collapsed, her frail body trembling. "What have I done?" she cried out, her voice a tormented whisper. Oh, what have I done? In a horrifying, chaotic instant, a stray spark from the fireplace ignited her tattered wedding dress. She was engulfed in flames. Pip, without a thought for his own safety, lunged forward to smother the fire, severely burning his own hands in the process. Though he saved her from immediate death, Miss Havisham lingered for only a short time, her body and spirit broken. Her final act was one of atonement. She secretly arranged to help secure Herbert Pocket's future. A last, desperate gesture of kindness from a soul consumed by its own darkness. Meanwhile, Pip sought out Estella, a woman whose fate seemed just as bound to suffering as her mother's. She had married the brutish and violent Bentley Drummle, fulfilling the cold destiny Miss Havisham had designed for her. "I am what you made me," Estella had once told Pip with chilling detachment. "Take that to your heart." But now, years of pain and a cruel marriage had begun to change her. Drummle's eventual death in an accident set her free, but not without leaving deep, invisible scars. "I have been bent and broken," Estella would later admit to Pip, her voice quiet and weary. "But I hope I have been bent and broken into a better shape." The day of the escape attempt arrived, dawning gray and ominous. Pip and Herbert rowed Magwitch down the Thames, their hearts pounding with every pull of the oars, hoping to reach a steamship bound for the continent. But their hope was short-lived. A boat carrying law officers suddenly appeared, closing in fast, and on that boat was Compeyson. A violent struggle erupted on the dark, churning water. Magwitch, fueled by decades of rage, fought his nemesis with a desperate fury. Dragging him down into the river's depths, Compeyson drowned, his treachery ending beneath the waves. But in the chaos, Magwitch was captured and gravely injured, lying in a prison hospital, awaiting his inevitable death sentence. Magwitch was no longer a source of shame for Pip. He was a father. Pip stayed by his side day after day, holding his hand, offering comfort and love. "I'm glad you lived, Pip," Magwitch whispered, his voice faint. "I lived for you." And in that quiet, sacred space between life and death, Pip finally spoke the words that marked his true moral victory, the words that redeemed his entire journey. "Dear friend," Pip said softly, his voice breaking, "you were more to me than all the wealth in the world." Magwitch died peacefully, finally knowing he was loved. With his death, his fortune was seized by the government. Pip lost everything. He was left penniless, deeply in debt, and physically broken. He collapsed into a delirious fever, his life hanging by a thread. And who was there to save him? Joe Gargery, his childhood friend, the simple blacksmith he had once been so ashamed of, appeared like an angel of mercy. Joe nursed Pip back to health, paid off all his debts without a word of judgment, and restored not just his body, but his dignity. "Ever the best of friends, ain't we, Pip?" Joe said simply, his love unconditional and pure. In that profound act of humility and forgiveness, Pip found his true rebirth. Years passed. Pip moved abroad and worked diligently as a clerk with Herbert, eventually repaying every penny he owed to Joe and Biddy. He lived a modest, honest life. One evening, he returned to the overgrown grounds where Satis' house once stood, and there, in the twilight, among the ruins, he found Estella. The pride, the ambition, the illusions that had once defined them were all gone, burned away by time and suffering. "I have been a better woman," Estella said quietly. "And I have been a better man," Pip replied. Dickens leaves their future uncertain, but it's a hopeful uncertainty. There are no grand promises, no false expectations. There is only understanding, forgiveness, and the quiet strength of maturity. Pip's great expectations, once so glittering and false, had finally, in the most unexpected way, come true. Thanks for watching. If you want to explore more stories about life, love, and redemption, be sure to subscribe to our channel.